So roll cameras. One, take one. Here we go, and action!
So by now you would have all seen this lady's face in every newspaper, a survivor from a bombing, allegedly, okay? Well, some people have looked up this lady's face, and it seems that this picture was used in a news article from 2018. Below is a section from the article dated July 2018. If anybody from Ukraine can translate, it'd be great. You can actually find it online. If you type gas leak injures lady, you will see this same lady's pictures are being used back in July 2018. And do you recognise this picture below which is being used? I'll show you where it's really from. Here you can see in the New York Times 2018, Israel, the same picture. I'm noticing a theme going on here, guys. Why are they using stock photos?
So let's talk about the media. $595 million salary subsidy in the last 4 years. $60 million pandemic-specific emergency support fund. $10 million special measures for journalism top-up for 2021 and 22. And then the recent request for $60 million, describing a $30 million annual shortfall in their operating budget.
If you look at America and American journalism in the last 5 and 6 years, the growth of especially of the cable channels, plural, and the absolute surrender to the most vile partisanship, the whole Russia collusion thing. If you read some of the sane people, Molly Hemingway's book, for example, you realize, and it's hard even to digest, that was all confection, that was all composure, that was all made up. And the savagery with which during the Trump years, any detail got in. When you switch up to the Biden administration, and we know that he's kind of Lon Chaney coming out of the chamber wrapped in linen, hardly anything. The huge scandals that are going on, the Durham Commission down in the States right now, that's not even getting reported. Much like, now I will switch, up here in Canada on the very day that the Stallions were going into Parliament Hill, you had the Coastal GasLink, the attack by 20 masked people who threatened people in the cabs of their trucks. As far as I know, it was close to 24 hours before that even got reported. Now, what I'm getting to before I get to the money is that the press as an institution, there are many exceptions, but by the mass of the institution, it is decided it is a player, that it will pick a side, that it will inflate the people that it likes to inflate, and it will derogate and damn those that it does not. They will do that from a perch of self-assumed moral superiority. Here's what you need to know. They have forgotten that their audience has intelligence and dignity, and they really think that it's more or less a cooperative movement between the elites of government bureaucracy, the university, and the press. And then when some low-class operation occurs that some bunch of, big hat truckers come in, who are these people who are interrupting our complacency and tranquility? It would have been impossible 50 years ago for any institutional press to say, oh, by the way, we see ourselves as opposition. That's what a press is. It inquires, it pushes, it tests. But at the same time, incidentally, most of our operation is getting funded by the people we're dealing with. Also, the close cohabitation of the high-class journalists with the people that they cover. I will tell you this, it doesn't show up on the newscast very often, but when you talk to what I'll call the guy in the street, they know that $600 million goes to the press. They are not watching anymore. The press is a part of this dynamic. It's a part of this crisis. I don't know where we go from it. We'll get to that, I'm sure. But there's been an awful diminishment of respect, dignity and prestige for both the government, and that means, by the way, the opposition parties too, and the press during this. This is why I brought up the United States. It wasn't idle. They had a sustained 4 years of believing what was not true. I'm stating this with definitive force. It simply wasn't true. Putin did not own Trump. Now, people might not like to hear that, but it was a confection. It was a setup. And yet all of the great investigative powers of some of the greatest journals and television stations in all the world went with it day and night. And now you'll have, for example, Mr. Biden's son with his contracts and these Chinese, not even to be mentioned. It's silly, but if you pound it hard enough and long enough, enough people will believe it.
I think it's part of this inevitable death spiral of the legacy media. These legacy news media sources are dying.
According to a new report by the Daily Mail, CNN averaged, ready for this, 548,000 viewers in the first week of January, compared to 2.7 million viewers the same week in 2021.
They're dead. And why? Well, they don't have a monopoly over the dissemination of information at all. YouTube, for all of its flaws, which are manifold, is an unbelievably powerful and accessible technology.
No question.
Where the cost of entry is zero. It's like no TV station can compete with that, period. They're done. And then these print media sources, especially when they're great people, Barry Weiss might be example, leave because they can't say what they want to. They don't have to lose much of their talent before all they've got left is hacks. And then everyone can publish to an international audience instantly online. So part of what we're seeing in the mainstream media is a technologically fueled death spiral. And I know how large corporations die. So there's this principle, Pareto principle, which is that the square root of the number of people in a given creative enterprise do half the work. And so if you're a news organization with 1,000 people, 30 of them do half the work. This is one of the most well-established findings in social science, period. So you got 1,000 people, and 970 of them are putting in time, and 30 of them are doing half the work. And then something shifts. Those people can't say what they want to say, let's say.
The 30.
The 30. Well, what do? Well, they leave. They go off like Barry Weiss did and start their own thing. And so then you're left with the 970 that was only doing half the work.
Yep.
And then the next 30 competent people leave. And soon all you've got is people who run the legacy media. And they say things like, well, Joe Rogan, people shouldn't listen to him because he just wings it.
You think about major newsrooms like CNN that have health departments and deaths and operations that work hard on verifying information on COVID-19. And then you have talk show stars like Joe Rogan who just wing it, who make it up as they go along.
It's like, how clueless can you possibly be? Or you have people like at CNN who treat Rogan like he's an outsider, despite the fact that he's pulling in numbers that are at least 5 to 8 times their average viewership. There's no way these legacy apparatuses can compete. How can they? Printing with universal distribution is free. Video with universal distribution is free. How can a network possibly compete? It can't. So spiral death. And as they die, they lose their editors, they lose their fact checkers, they lose their good journalists, they lose everybody with courage, and then they put out pablum and they're tempted by clickbait because that's what you have to do while you're dying. It's like, Christ, we have to attract attention somehow.
Let's bring in CNN's chief media correspondent, Brian Stelter. Brian, what is Joe Rogan now saying?
He is now apologizing, and we're going to find out if that's enough for Spotify, the company that has an exclusive distribution deal with him.
So you say, well, Joe Rogan apologized, and everybody clicks on it, and they read it, and they think that's a lie, and so you've lost another 5% of your viewership.
Yeah.